fellow bookish witches. Welcome to Witchy Reads, a place where we talk about books and other bookish things. I went back and forth on if I wanted to make this video. Ultimately, I decided yes, I want to make this video because not only do I want to make my feelings on this matter known, since this involves an author who I have mentioned quite a bit in my other videos, and also an author I used to admire and look up to, and more importantly, enjoy their work. I want to address how I feel about everything. Mainly, I want to talk about grief.
Not of losing an artist necessarily, especially one who many consider a hero. The grief of losing a fandom, of losing what you thought was a safe space to escape to. What I want to talk about is the grief of saying goodbye to art that meant a lot. Art that shaped you probably as a human, as a reader, maybe even as a writer yourself. Chapter 1. We know what's happening. I think it's safe to say that most people in the bookish community at this point, even those outside the bookish community, know what has happened. It's been over a month at this point since the Vulture article was published. The details of the horrendous, alleged essay and rape done by this author were some of the most brutal reading I have done in a while. I was ready for the allegations to be pretty par for the course, but as I kept reading that Vulture article, it miraculously just kept getting worse. The other thing that kind of cushioned the blow was the fact that these allegations actually broke over 6 months ago through the British podcast Tortoise Media. Council of Geeks did a fantastic job breaking down all the allegations that were initially documented by that podcast. It was that video, in fact, where I first learned of all the details surrounding the allegations, as it was all that was readily available at the time. What I appreciate about Council of Geeks video is not only did they cover the allegations, they made a point to critique and criticize how these allegations were initially reported on, which, let's be honest, wasn't the greatest. The basic takeaway was the reporting was mediocre at best, which made it hard to determine how bad the allegations truly were. You should always believe women, but it wasn't exactly made clear if this was simply a power imbalance with consenting adults. Not great, but something that this author could crawl back from theoretically. Or was it something much more sinister? If it had been the former, and had he chosen to step out and immediately apologize, things could have maybe gone differently. With the publication of the Vulture article over 6 months later, we now have our answer. And it is far more depraved than even I was prepared for. I will not be going over the details of the article. I feel like plenty of people have done that already. If that is what you're here for, I will link a few videos down below that can give you that.
While we're on the topic, I did not like the fact that this article was behind a paywall. Something like this should have been given to the public free of charge. Just know, if you haven't read it, it is horrendous, and the fact that at the end of the day, this author will most likely just get a slap on the wrist is infuriating. Chapter 2. Why am I making this video? So many people love to spout out the phrase, "Don't meet your heroes." A lot of times we hear this after said encounter has happened with the hero, which then resulted in a bad experience. And then we're basically at the lowest point you could possibly be at as a fan. No gentleness, no understanding, which is honestly tragic. I personally have had a few such encounters, or at minimum, I've lost respect for an artist I was once fond of for one bad reason or another. As such, I've come to embrace that philosophy more as I've gotten older. Don't get it twisted. I'm still a part of fandoms. I go to conventions. I get autographs, pictures. I go to the Q&As. But I don't want to do more than that, if that makes sense. Because no matter how you try to validate it, rationalize it, the hard truth is there is a line. There is always going to be a line. And if you try to push past that line, the only thing that you'll find on the other side is disappointment. Usually. If these allegations had come to light 20 years ago, my reaction would have most likely been much different than it is now. I'm devastated now, but back then I would have been absolutely crushed. For my own mental health and love of the art I consume, I decided to stop putting certain famous people on a pedestal. Authors are humans after all. They are nowhere near perfect despite what social media or even their diehard fans want to believe. There is a spectrum of morality upon which they and everyone else falls. On one side, there is good. The other side is bad. In between is a whole mess. And this is where most people reside. No one is perfect. And for the most part, we as a society help each other deal when we ourselves or someone we like happens to fall short of where we want to be morally. Things can become even more complicated when the person who ends up falling on the bad side of the spectrum is the creator of the art we consume and love. This video is how I'm choosing to process that grief in losing art that I love, having to put aside art that I love. It's the grief I'm feeling at the loss of the books that meant far more to me than the person behind their creation. Because no matter what I try to do to justify their existence in my life, they're tainted now. Chapter 3, Death of the Author is Flawed. Death of the Author seeks to ignore the fact that an author's legacy is in the very text on the pages of their books. A big part of making this theory work is deciding that the badness, the inappropriateness isn't reflected in the art itself. Because if it is, readers would then have to acknowledge that fact and accept that there is no gray area. We can't just throw up our hands into the air and exaggeratedly yell, "Oh well, this person who I'm a fan of is only slightly problematic. It's not on me, a person who is actively part of their fandom, who partly funds this person's life and means to create this art to prevent them from continuing their horrible behavior. So I'm just going to keep enjoying this problematic person's problematic books. It's a victimless crime." Is it a victimless crime though? In this specific case, the victims have been named. They exist. I do believe that it is our role as supposed good human beings and as readers to stop funding people like this once we learn the truth. We do live in a society, and it's not our fault when an artist does something horrendous. At that point, all we want to do is separate them from that art. The problem is, with bigger authors, this is more difficult. It's hard to think of their books without thinking of them. Look at the thumbnail for this very video. The author's name appears nowhere on those books, but I can bet just by looking at the cover, you know who wrote them.
It would be hard to not associate these books with this author. How then can we justify buying his books, reading his books, keeping his books, if we decide we want to keep them? Perhaps all that's left to do is say goodbye in our own way and grieve, as hard as that might be, and as angry as we might get. Chapter 4. Yes, anger. I understand that no one likes to be made the fool, that to admit you might have been wrong about a person takes loads of humility and self-reflection that frankly, a lot of people just don't possess. This has been made abundantly clear by the swell of social media posts from those that claimed to have known better, to have felt something was off from the very beginning. They just knew he was bad. No, you didn't. No, you fucking did not. There is literally a psychological term for this: hindsight bias. Sure, you might not have liked the guy or his art, but to sit there and say you had some telepathic level of insight into this guy's crimes is disingenuous. To spout this off with no filter does nothing but hurt this author's victims. That includes their fans that now feel betrayed. Why pick fans when they're already down? Chapter 5. What about the art? What are we meant to do with the art that we've curated from authors that have for lack of a better explanation, behaved badly. Though it might seem like it, I'm not making this video to judge those that decided to keep the books created by these authors that they already own, especially if they mean something to you beyond the authors who wrote them. I have a few books that fall into this category, and I've made peace with that. The big difference is I no longer purchase things from those authors. I simply have kept certain things that I already had. The money was already spent.
I don't keep these books on my bookshelf anymore, but the sentimentality I feel for them has them stored safely in a box in my closet. With this most recent bad author situation, I actually do want to get rid of some of his books that I already have. I'm still working on trying to reconcile my emotional attachment to them. Plus, putting his work back out into the world, into the hands of others, I don't necessarily feel right about that. More than likely, the books I have that I want to get rid of will be going to a library, so that if someone in the future does want to read any of these books, they can, without a cent more going to the author. There is one more thing that I have to contend with, and that is I will be adding a graphic novel that is associated with this author to my collection. This was a Kickstarter that I backed over a year ago for a graphic novel edition of Good Omens. The Terry Pratchett estate are who created the Kickstarter, and while they have offered refunds to those who want it, I'm happy to support them and will be happy to have that book in my home, because I know it represents Terry Pratchett and the artist behind this particular project, not that author. The addition of a nice on-theme sticker covering a certain someone's name should do the trick. Sir Terry Pratchett deserves to be on my shelf, and I won't feel guilt for that. I know a lot of people are using the excuse for Good Omens that it feels more of a Pratchett book versus the other guys, and not everyone agrees with that assessment. Having read both authors, I can at least see where they are coming from with that theory. Good Omens feels more like it was this particular author's idea, and then Pratchett made it come to life. I'm not going to judge those who requested a refund or for them not wanting anything associated with this author on their bookshelf or in their home. However, I will say that the criticism the Terry Pratchett estate has received over this project has been a little overdramatic and cruel. In addition to demanding refunds, which again, the estate has been happy to provide, there are also fans demanding a statement on the estate's position in all of this. They also want to make sure that that particular author won't see a cent of their money for this project. The fact is, that author was probably paid in advance for his agreeing to use his rights in this project. So any refunds requested by fans at this point won't be hurting that author, but they will hurt the Terry Pratchett estate and the artist who did months of laborious work on this project. That just doesn't sit right with me. So I personally didn't request a refund. Good Omens falls under that sentimentality for me, so I can't bring myself to get rid of the copies of that book that I own. I still haven't decided if they are going to be removed from my shelf along with the others. I've already removed the books by that author, but Good Omens is still on my shelf. Currently, for now. I recently heard a quote that I think encapsulates this feeling perfectly.
Probably a healthy thing for everybody to do is to find ways to create positive change in the world that are not about curating your media consumption.
You, as a fan, as a reader, as a consumer of art, have every right to remove media that no longer brings you joy. But when it is a situation where it hurts other artists that had nothing to do with the infraction, are you really doing good? Or is it just about you? Is the workbench of morality on what we consume on us as individuals, or should it be on society as a whole? I just know I didn't feel right taking back the money I put in to support the graphic artist and Pratchett's estate. Even though I've taken this stance, I know not everyone will. Some may even think I'm doing a disservice by continuing my what they might call support in one aspect. I don't necessarily see it that way, because This will be the last time I speak about this author, and I don't plan on reading any more of his books. At the end of the day, I will always side with the victims, with women. Chapter 6, Believe Women. It shouldn't come as a surprise that through every dirty deed that is dragged up about the next celebrity, the next author, the next artist, we simply need to continue to believe women. That's easier said than done, but it doesn't have to be. When the initial allegations came out last summer, I knew those women had gone through hell to come out the other side and tell their stories. Sure, I was still hoping for a better outcome, but that doesn't change the fact that this author did horrific things. With the release of the Vulture article, it's pretty clear that these allegations have a basis, and as much as this author's books shaped me as a reader, and quite honestly as a writer, it will never be the same for me. That doesn't appear to be stopping a certain demographic of readers and fans from continuing their support and purchasing his art. I've seen them all across the different platforms,
screaming at the women who believe the allegations and his victims that they need to wait for more proof. What happened to innocent until proven guilty?
Grape culture is what happened. Since the courts very rarely, if at all, bring these predators to justice, the court of public opinion is the only power we have. This is why women are always terrified to speak up and tell their stories, because it will likely never get them the justice they deserve, and public opinion is a fickle thing. Just look at what's happening with Blake Lively or what happened to Amber Heard. I believe these women, and in order to stick to what I believe, I need to try to move on from who I once thought this author was, because who he was a lie. Chapter 7, Read Another Book. When the dust has settled, once we've properly grieved, and whatever justice has been doled out, most likely what will be considered a blip to this author's career, we as readers will have to decide what to do next. I know what I'm going to do, and it's the same thing I'm going to suggest to other readers. Read another book. There are so many amazing books out there written by incredible authors who are just dying to tell their stories and share them with readers. Grieve if you have to. I know I have. Give the books that meant the most to you a fond farewell and do with them what you must. Donate or stow away. After that, pick up another book and read it. Who knows? You might find another favorite, something that tugs at your heart or your mind in ways you haven't experienced in a long while. And if you do happen to find another favorite book and another author does something despicable, know that you are allowed to grieve and move on and on and on as many times as it takes. Thank you for watching this. I hope that those of you that need to grieve either this art or another kind of art, just know you are not alone. If you enjoy my videos and would like to support my channel, the best way to do that right now is to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and leave a little comment letting me know that you were here. It really is a big help, and I greatly appreciate it. Until our next chapter together, merry part and blessed be.